We are back on Take Action News. We promised you in our opening monologue on this, our first program as host of Take Action News, we promised you transparency, and we promised that we would share our opinions with you. Now, number one for transparency, our next guest is co-director of Social Security Works, which, one, is a wonderful organization, two, I have a long association with, and three, is the sponsor of Take Action News. So, lest you think that in any way that represents a conflict of interest, I guess you could look at it that way, but I think of it very sincerely as a confluence of beliefs and opinions, which is why it's been a pleasure to work with them as an organization and with my next guest as an individual. Since I promised I'd share with you, be open about my personal opinions when reporting, I will also tell you that I consider Eric Kingson to be a wonderful human being. I love this man. I think he's done an enormous amount of good for society in his work as co-director of Social Security Works and his long history writing about social insurance in general and Social Security in particular, for the depth of his insight, for the warmth of his friendship, and for his leadership. I'm grateful to know him. So, and as the host of Take Action News, I certainly pray he's on the line with me right now. Eric, are you here?
I'm here, Richard, and thank you, and I think of you as a magnificent person and extraordinary voice in this effort.
Well, thank you so much. I think our audience has probably figured out by now this is not going to be a contentious interview, but I think it can be an interesting and important one, because as we get to the end of the year, I'm fascinated. You and I haven't had a chance to talk about this, but I did a year-end wrap-up on Social Security, and I'm very interested in your thoughts, because I thought 2013 did not go as I expected, but what did you think? What kind of year have we had? And then I'll ask you after that about the year we might be looking forward to, but what did you think happened with Social Security in 2013?
Well, all things considered, I think we got out of it very well, and thanks really to the efforts of many organizations, many people who wrote into their members of Congress, to the White House, and said, not only should you not cut my Social Security, but hey, folks, start thinking about expanding these benefits, because we're hurting outside of Washington. So I think at the beginning of the year, I would have thought that there was a very good chance we would come out of 2013 with a cut in Social Security, the change in the cost of living adjustment that had been proposed. We came out of 2013 without that cut and with a new sense of momentum where more members of Congress, congressional champions like Bernie Sanders, like Elizabeth Warren, Mark Begich, many others are now talking about expanding benefits and addressing a major retirement income crisis that Americans face.
Well, I want to ask you a little bit more about that, because, first of all, I was pessimistic going into 2013. I felt we would see what the cut you described, which is called the chain CPI, and that we would be subject to another year of relentless rhetoric about why this was just a modest adjustment, when you and I know it turns into a very substantial cut, that I really thought the forces were against us. You know, I've written at various points over the years about keeping our optimism, keeping our sense of faith in what's possible, but I must admit, looking back, I was a pessimist, and I've been pleasantly surprised, and perhaps the biggest surprise of all, although some of us have been arguing for strengthening Social Security and increasing its benefits, since they are actually low compared to those of other developed countries, and since there's a retirement crisis going on, I didn't realize the extent to which that would catch on in 2013, enough to provoke some ill-thought-out counter reactions from the anti-Social Security crowd, especially when Elizabeth Warren, who's become our leading progressive, signed on to the notion that we should increase Social Security. Now we're at this pivot point at the end of one year, the beginning of another. We're going into an election year, 2014. What do you think the Social Security battle will look like in the next 6 to 12 months?
Well, first, I share with you, Richard, I'm delighted that the discussion has shifted away from how much should we cut Social Security. Until sometime around October or so this year, November, the discussion still had been, are we going to cut it a lot or are we going to decimate it? Now the discussion is, it's reframed to whether we should expand benefits. That is no longer an outlying position. It's a very realistic position. I also think it's reality-based. We have data telling us that 2/3 of working Americans, that's people who are not getting Social Security benefits, 2/3 of people who are working are not going to be able to maintain their standard of living because they've lost their pensions in many cases. Some have lost jobs, not have had good wage increases. Some have lost housing equity if they owned homes. Some even lost homes. So we know that moving forward in the next 20, 30 years, unless we do something, and especially in Social Security, we're going to have a major crisis on our hands. I think one of the things that's happened, Richard, is that the relentless march of this has begun to sink in. I think that I'm going back to 2013. I think what was very effective in 2013 was getting the message out outside of Washington, getting the press began to turn around some on the Social Security issue. When we went into 2013, they were still talking about this so-called change CPI as a benefit adjustment, a tweak, a better way of measuring inflation. By the middle of the year or even earlier, it became clearer and clearer that this was a stealth cut and a very significant cut. And it was reported that way. And I think that helped. Over the summer, there was a lot of work to put expanding Social Security on the agenda. Going into 2014, I think we need to remain vigilant. Right now, that cut called the change CPI is off the table. Right now, the proposals that came out of the President's Deficit Commission to raise retirement age, to change the benefit formula in a way that would have decimated it for young people, that proposal hasn't been discussed seriously for the last year. But these things can reappear. We have a debt ceiling negotiation coming up. The change CPI could sneak into that. I don't think it will. It's an election year. I think more and more members of Congress have begun to catch on that this is a dangerous issue for them to favor cuts, and that some are beginning to realize it's popular and it makes sense to be talking about gradual expansion. So I think we may be at a turning point. We have Senator Harkin to thank for this, Senator Sherrod Brown, Linda Sanchez in the House, and many others who have put forward major significant increases in benefits. Sherrod Brown and Senator Harkin are proposing an $800 increase on average in benefits, and also a cost of living adjustment that would be fairer to people who receive benefits and would basically really keep them up to date. So I think we're going to see more discussion on this. And then I think there's something else, and you hinted this, you talk about this in your
Eric?
Recent, yes?
I'm sorry, the something else is going to have to wait for your next visit because we only have about 30 seconds. But if you can give us in 10 seconds what the something else is, we'd love to hear it, and then we're going to
Absolutely. This is more than dollars and cents. It's a value issue, and the American public gets it in a way that Washington hasn't for a while. That we're not only struggling for Social Security, we're struggling for maintaining basic middle-class status for Americans and also for a decent society, for maintaining that social compact.
I think that's absolutely right. And I think that if people want to know more about your work, they can go to, is it socialsecurityworks.org?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Eric Kingson, thanks so much for being with us. Please keep up the wonderful work, and we'll be watching together to see what happens to Social Security.
Okay, and Happy New Year, RJ.
And same to you.
Thanks. Bye.